Hi, and welcome to this second part of my recording around my prolapse recovery. And this is, I'm going to be chatting to you right now about healing prolapse and specifically around exercises and lifestyle changes. But also, a lot of this is really relevant for avoiding a prolapse in the first place. So, I'm going to talk to you about having a pelvic floor routine and also some advice on other exercise that I learned, and then also some lifestyle tips and changes, which is super, super important, especially as women, for us to understand. So in terms of having a pelvic floor routine, that's just something that's just so important and so essential in terms of rebuilding strength and tone. Exercising your pelvic floor muscles is super, super key. I feel that I'm not going to go into what makes how to do a pelvic floor exercise, because there's so many videos out there on this. And I also would say I'm going to talk a little bit about it and some real important tips that I've learned from watching lots of videos, but I'm not going to go into that in detail because there's so much else that I want to share. And so what I would say, first of all, it's really great to get an assessment about how you're doing pelvic floor exercises. This is where a pelvic floor physio comes in. So for example, if you are over co-contracting, so for example, that you're really clenching your bum and your thighs, but actually you think you're clenching your squeezing your pelvic floor. Or, for example, something that's really common for women is that they think they're squeezing their pelvic floor, but they're actually bearing down. They're not pulling in and up, they're pushing out. And apparently around a third of women do that. It's really, really common. And so having a pelvic floor assessment, the pelvic floor physio can guide you in how to do the best pelvic floor exercise possible. And also one that's designed for where you're at. So for example, you might be somebody who's better at endurance pelvic floor exercises where you are holding for a period of time, but you maybe not so good at the quick exercises where you're pulsing, or vice versa. And so then you can have a program of pelvic floor exercises that's tailored to where you're exactly at. So, there's lots of different people that you can go and get those assessments from. But I would also say just get to know your own pelvic floor, because we're encouraged to do breast exams regularly for our health. And I totally believe it's really good for us to really know our vulvas and our vaginas and do regular vulva and vagina exams, because we can get to know what feels good. We can insert a finger and squeeze and contract and see how that feels. And so it's empowering for us to get to know this part of our body for ourselves, because often our doctors and the medical professionals and our partners have seen and touched this area more than some women have. So by getting to know this area of our body feels empowering, and not just how she feels, but how she looks. And so many women haven't looked at this area of their body in a number of years. And if you didn't look at your face in the mirror for 10, 20 years, you'd have a shock. So it's really good to just be familiar with this area of our body, because then we can see what's changing. We can feel what's changing. And we may be able to catch things before they get worse and before they become more serious. So back to pelvic floor exercises. I really recommend Dr. Bree, who I mentioned in the first talk that I did, and her YouTube channel, Femme Fusion Fitness. There is so much wonderful stuff on there, which was such a support for me during my time of going through this. And I still watch some of her stuff now. She's really brilliant. And so, when you're doing pelvic floor exercises, if you're watching this because of prolapse, it's usually then because your pelvic floor is weaker. Because some people, their pelvic floor can be hypertonic or tense. And so if your pelvic floor is really tense, then the key for you is learning how to let go and relax. And if your pelvic floor is weaker, then it's about the strengthening and toning. So when you're doing your pelvic floor for strengthening and toning, it's like zipping up. You want to pull the sort of pelvic floor up. And so there's exercises that you can do that are around zipping up from the anus up to the clitoris at the front and pulling, squeezing in and up. And then there's other specific exercises that you can do around the vaginal muscles, and there's different types of exercises. So I really recommend, getting a basic pelvic floor exercise to start with and then working from there. It's as important to, when you're squeezing, just to say that actually, it's as important to relax as to squeeze. is another really important tip that is really crucial, because for some women they do pelvic floor exercises like a really like they're doing weights in the gym of like a squeeze, 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 and they're maybe not fully relaxing, and that's really super important. But whatever it is, go and find yourself a good pelvic floor routine. Go and watch some videos that are on YouTube. Go and see somebody like a pelvic floor specialist. There's some really great stuff out there so that you've got a really great pelvic floor exercise routine, because it can really make a difference. It certainly has done for me. And in terms of preventing prolapse, again, really, really important. But it's really important to ensure that you're doing it from that you're not putting habits that sort of appear good on top of bad habits. That's why having an assessment can be good. That's why doing some research can be good, so that sometimes it's about unlearning bad habits to then put the good habits in place. And so for me, going to see a pelvic floor specialist and understanding like the different types of exercises in terms of the strengthening ones and the quick ones, and where my body was in relation to those. I had a good sense of them, but I just picked up some things that really helped me to get better quicker. So that's where I recommend that. And then for me, in terms of a pelvic floor routine, doing my jade egg has been a really important practice. So I'd already was a jade egg practitioner, and the jade egg is an egg that's a piece of jade that's shaped like an egg, and it's inserted inside the vagina, and exercises are done using the egg for strength and resistance and toning. And also the jade egg has a string. A lot of the jade eggs are drilled, so there's a string, so you can also use the string to pull the egg as you squeeze against it, which creates more resistance and stronger exercises. And the jade egg is an amazing tool for toning our pelvic floor. It's an amazing tool for healing there. If, for example, we have numbness and discomfort, it can really help. It can help in terms of pleasure and sensation. And the practices come from the Taoist tradition, and they can also help for balancing out our menstrual cycle, helping us navigate through perimenopause and menopause, help with circulation and lubrication. So they can just help in a whole host of ways. In 2020 will have an online course around the jade egg, and I also do workshops around the jade egg, because it's such an incredible practice. And it's not just the jade egg, it's practices that support the jade egg. So for example, things like movement in terms of qigong and breast massage. So it's a whole suite of a system for our sexual health and well-being, our vitality and our pleasure. So I'm not going to go into it in this YouTube video, but there is, for me, it's been a really fundamental part of my healing journey, and actually it's probably one that warrants a whole YouTube video just on itself in terms of my healing journey with prolapse with the jade egg. But just to say, that's something else. But again, it can be really good to get some advice from an established practitioner around that and how to use the jade egg. And it's only in terms of prolapse, of sort of more milder prolapses, it wouldn't be something that you do in terms of more moderate to serious prolapses, because the jade egg is a weight. If it was used incorrectly, then it wouldn't be good at all. So it's certainly good to follow, get some support and advice on that. But definitely for mild prolapses, it absolutely can make a difference. And I'm not the only one who's used it for that. Many women have done. And then not just in terms of our pelvic floor, but our pelvic floor is linked, our pelvic floor isn't in isolation. It's part of a structure of our overall body. So what's really important is strengthening our thighs, our glutes, our abdominals. The whole supporting structure of the pelvic floor is super important. So things that could be done correctly, like squats and lunges and different things, can really support our pelvic floor strengthening. I did a workout with something called core abdominal workout, which was designed for recovery from things like prolapse, with a company in America called Phoenix Core Solutions. And I find that that's really helpful, because it helps to build up strength around the core and the prolapse and the pelvic floor. And I certainly would, I think exercise surrounding is so important, but certain exercises aren't so good. So for example, high impact exercises can be make a prolapse worse, and actually even cause prolapses. Some women have I've heard about experiences of women where they've gone running a few weeks after childbirth, and then because they've gone running too soon, that's when the prolapse has happened. So that's, you know, not unusual. So it's important to do appropriate exercises, crunches, where you're doing those sort of crunches, crunching up towards the pelvic floor when you're lying down. Again, you're putting more pressure on the pelvic floor, so that's not good. Again, Dr. Bree is wonderful around this. She has got a whole host of videos on how to do pelvic floor appropriate exercises. So they're exercises that really you can look after your pelvic floor. So for example, you know, how to do a safe plank in yoga for your pelvic floor. And she's got a whole suite of stuff. She's got stuff on running after a prolapse. You know, really investigate her channel around exercise, and, you know, to get informed around it, and how to do yoga safely after a prolapse. Whole host of different stuff there. So just want you to sort of be aware of those things and signpost you to some great resources. And also, again, for me, Qigong's really good, because Qigong is about cultivating life force. We have our meridian lines in our bodies that are like our energy circuit system. And our meridian lines can get blocked. And when they're healthy and functioning, energy really flows in our body, and we have our qi, that is uprising qi, that we are cultivating to help everything lift. You know, if you frown right now and do a big frown, you know, you can feel sometimes when you do that, your pelvic floor starts to droop a little bit. And when we smile, our pelvic floor lifts. Okay, they're very interlinked. And so smiling's really good, actually, for your pelvic floor. And because because smiling's energy that lifts us. So anything that lifts us. So Qigong is, you know, is really, I found to be super, super helpful, because a lot of the Qigong practices are not just about helping our energy to rise, but they're also about toning, strengthening, posture, good posture, all of that. Another thing that I found really good, as well as doing some appropriate exercise at the beginning, was rest. Our pelvic floor, when we have a prolapse, I often, you know, the women I've spoke to are doing too much when they have a prolapse, and it's a real invitation to rest. And one of the best forms of rest is just lying down on the floor at the end of the day and propping your bed, and having if that's your body, and, you know, that's your head here, your pelvis here, propping your pelvis up so everything's moving downwards. Okay, so you're getting giving your prolapse a rest against gravity, so that everything slides into natural position, and it just gives your prolapse a rest. And so, or if you find that your prolapse is more, you're more conscious of it than usual, again, that position can really help. It's just asking for, you might be just asking for a rest. And I find different things help for me, like propping cushions or a yoga bolster underneath my pelvis, and just lying like that, and having my legs up in the air, so the blood flow is coming down my legs, down through my pelvis, and everything's just having a rest. Another one that's really good is just putting your bum against a wall, and then having your legs up against the wall, so that they're propped up, and again, just lying there and resting. And, you know, it might be that you just have a few, I was doing that a few times in the day because my body was asking for it. And sometimes I do it a bit longer, maybe put some nice relaxation music on, or listen to something, and just really allow my body to relax, and sometimes to just be, I was just following my breath and just enjoying the sensations, because my body, when I was doing that rest, was saying, yes, please. More of that. And then there's a couple of other things that you might want to investigate that I found have been helpful, or other people I know have found helpful. So one of them is hypopressives. Hypopressives are quite a new system that have come out around, it's breath practices, around helping some people have really found successes in helping it to shift prolapses, and to help with lots of other things as well. So if you look up hypopressives and see if you've got a hypopressives practitioner in your area. I did do it. I went and had a couple of training sessions, and you need to commit to it regularly. And I was doing lots of other things, and I just stuck with some of the other things. But I thought that I certainly think it's something that I imagine could be really helpful. It was just I had so much else going on that was working for me, so I never stuck with it. And the other thing is Christine Kent and the whole woman system. And she has a whole different take on what happens when a prolapse happens. And I had one friend who found her system really helpful. So I'd recommend, and I know others, I've read that others do too. And again, it was just, I did look at it, but I just had so much else that was going on that I didn't go deep into that one. But that might be something else to have a look at as well. So that's sort of exercise tips and in terms of pelvic floor and exercises around the pelvic floor. So let's talk a little bit about lifestyle tips. Now, for example, one rule that's really important, especially when we're in prolapse recovery, or we're especially is we exhale on the effort of doing something. So for example, if we're about to lift something, we breathe in and then our pelvic floor expands. And just to say about breathing, the natural way is we breathe in, our pelvic floor expands, and as we exhale, our pelvic floor squeezes and engages slightly. That's a natural way. But for example, I was reverse breathing and doing it the other way. I think that was years of being a smoker, where I just learned to breathe in and squeeze everything in at that point. So it took me, before I had my prolapse, I'd done a lot of work around breathing. Oh, and also just as women, don't we just want to keep, we worry what our bellies look like and all of that nonsense. And so for me, it took me a while as part of my Qigong training to learn to breathe in and let my belly expand. And so, when you've got a pelvic floor that's healthy, you might do exercises where you breathe in and squeeze your pelvic floor, or exercises where you breathe in and you expand your pelvic floor. That can be, we might do that in yoga or Qigong or jade egg for different reasons. But in prolapse recovery, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to, especially, but also in everyday life, if we're, for example, lifting heavy objects, we want to limit the amount of pressure that we put on our pelvic floor. So my pelvic floor physio would call it, it's like pressure management. And if we're continually putting a lot of pressure and bearing down on our pelvic floor, that's going to weaken it. And that's what can lead partly to prolapse, or even cause a prolapse. So for example, as we were about to lift something, what can be really good is we breathe in and we let our pelvic floor expand. We exhale, and then we exhale, engage the pelvic floor, so the pelvic floor is engaged, and then at that point we lift something, okay? Because then we're limiting, our pelvic floor is engaged and it's strong, and it's going to limit the pressure that happens on our pelvic floor. So when we're lifting, the rule is exhale on the effort. But also, this is true, for example, when we're, for example, because persistent coughing can cause a prolapse. If you're coughing a lot, to try and engage your pelvic floor as you cough, as you sneeze, as you blow your nose, these sort of things can be really important. But also, it's just the rule is sort of exhale on the effort. And so also another thing about lifting is that you don't lean forward and lift something. You actually squat down and then lift it up, so that the effort's coming from the power of your legs as you lift, and the strength, because everything's engaged and solid, rather than you moving forward and picking something up, and then the pressure becomes on your pelvic floor. And the same, if you're, say for example, your mum and you're lifting socks up off the floor, the research I found is it's better to sort of squat down and pick them up than lean forward and lift them up, because when we're leaning forward and bending down, we're again putting pressure on the pelvic floor. So little techniques like this can make a difference day to day as to the weight that we put on our pelvic floor. Now, I'm not an expert in this. I'm just sharing the heap of techniques that I picked up, that I've incorporated into my lifestyle. And I feel that they've made a difference in the potential of the prolapse I have getting worse, and maybe even made a difference in the healing, because it's changed so much of how I just operate on a day-to-day basis around if I'm lifting, engaging my pelvic floor, if I'm sneezing, trying to remember. And the more we do it, the more natural it happens. Or if I'm bending down to get something, doing that correctly so that my posture is good. Also, when I'm sitting and standing, that my everything's upright, because if we're slouched like this, I read apparently that more young people are getting prolapses in their like 20s, because they're like this on computers and phones and smartphones. So when you're hunched like this, you're squashing everything down into your pelvic, your belly, everything's getting squashed down. So it's bearing pressure on the pelvic floor. So sitting up, making sure your posture is right, sitting on your sit bones. One thing that I did get was a standing desk, so that because I do quite a bit of computer work, so as I'm stood up, I'm stood up now a lot during the day. So having a standing desk has made a massive, massive difference. And I just think it's been so good for everything, actually. And also you can get these mats that you stand on that help you to engage your core when you're standing there. So I have a lot of, I'm not actually at my usual location with my standing desk, but I would do a lot of these things when I'm standing up now. And I feel that makes a huge difference. And then a final little thing that was helpful was I was told to sleep with a cushion between my knee. So if I sleep on my side and I've got my knees up, just having a cushion on my knee gave space to keep my pelvis in a certain alignment, which again will help without squashing everything inside. And actually I still do that quite a lot now, because it's really comfy. I think it helps with your spine and everything in terms of alignment. So that's another thing around posture. Then a really fundamental part that I want to finish with is our toileting habits. And this is not just about how we go to the toilet in terms of number twos, but also in terms of how we wee. So if you have any form of constipation, to sort it out. It is one of the most common causes of prolapse. So for example, it might be dietary, whatever it is, get it sorted. Go and see herbalists, naturopaths, go and do some research, look at what diet foods might be causing it. Because if you're doing that and straining on a regular basis, you are risking a prolapse. Things that worked for me were the herbs, definitely, drinking more water, and warm water is really good as well, and taking more oil in my diet. Those sort of things. I was actually eating I was eating really well, actually. I still do. But it was, and then it was things like that, like I said in the first video, the sort of lapse in just eating some fast food, which just doesn't suit my body anymore. So really, not fast food, it was fried food, and from like a restaurant, and it just doesn't agree with me anymore. So really honoring what feels true for your body, and finding what works for you. I really encourage that. And sometimes it takes research and time. And there's a technique that you can Google or look on YouTube called the brace and bulge technique, which is a way that helps you to go to the toilet if you feel a bit stuck, so that you breathe in and then you release, but you release from the anal muscles, not by pushing the whole of the pelvic floor down. And also making a noise sometimes helps, like a ah sound as a relaxation and letting go. And the other thing that's super important is getting what they call a squatty potty. And so if you look at, again, look at why squatty potties are important. But what they do is, rather than sitting down on the toilet like we're sitting in a chair, it's a stool that we put our feet on, so it raises our knees, and so that our body is at a better angle that's more natural for releasing. And so it's just more natural for our bodies. So Google squatty potties and you'll find lots around that. And so, I have one all the time, even though I'm fine, much better. I have that sort of squatty potty because it's just more natural for our bodies. And so that's definitely something to really look at. In terms of going for a wee, this is again really, really important. For example, some little tips. Don't blow your nose when peeing at the same time. Apparently that can create pressure. So I picked up all these random tips, but I just think they're so important. Don't pee quickly. How many times have I said to myself, I'm just going for a quick wee. I'm going for a quick wee in a rush. Then you push it out to make it come faster. You don't do it consciously. It just happens. So when people say to me, I'm just off for a quick wee, I now say, no, go for a slow one. Take your time. Because when we do that, we're putting pressure on our pelvic floor. Don't hover over the toilet seat. When we hover, it causes our thighs to tense and can create tension in our pelvic floor. So the tip there is to line the toilet seat with toilet roll and then sit on it. The squatty potty can also be really good for going for a wee, as well as a number 2. If your bladder doesn't fully empty, now that was what's happening for me because of my level 1 prolapse, that it wasn't fully emptying. So I was going to the toilet, and then a few minutes later feeling like I really needed the toilet again. And it's because there's a whole sort of reason for that happening in terms of the bladder sort of sagging a little bit, so it's not buoyant in its natural full position, so not the whole lot of wee can't get out. So if that's happening, if you're going to the toilet and then you're needing to go quite quickly, and then you're doing quite a bit of wee, when you go to the toilet, when you think you finished, just stay for a minute, rock back and forth on the toilet. And sometimes you might find that more happens. Or the other tip is to stand up for a moment, sit down, and that can help to move that extra bit forward. So that's another thing to do. Don't go for a just in case wee, because if we can train our bladder to go too much. And also what women do apparently after prolapse is they get so nervous about going for they don't stop drinking so much water because they don't want to be going to the toilet a lot. But then they just become constipated, so cause even more problems. So really make sure you maintain or up your level of water, so you're drinking the right amount of water. Now, one pelvic floor physio has described it as 4 different types of going for a wee. There's a just in case wee, there's I could wee, I should wee, and I'm bursting. And she said to avoid the just in case and the I'm bursting wee, because it trains our bladder to in not so good ways. And I used to be one of those people, just in case, I've got that in my family, just go for a wee just in case, like with children. And so just going for a wee in case is something to just stop your body doing, because it trains your bladder to go when it doesn't really need to, and it gets that sort of urge of needing to go more alive in your system. An expert will explain this far better than me, but I think it's important that I found this really valuable. And it's also about, she said, it's about distinguishing between the I could go and I should go, and they're the times when you do go, but not when you're bursting, because that's pressure on the pelvic floor, and again and not the just in case wheeze. What else was I going to share with you? And then also things like the habits that we can get into. So don't allow ourselves the habits of, like, when we pee in the shower, for example, or we pee just when we put the key in the door, we think, I'll just go to the toilet now I've arrived, because it's that Pavlov's dog association of this action means going for a wee, and then it can trigger feelings of urgency. So for example, when we pee in the shower, it can trigger feelings of urgency when we're near or around water, or we put that key in the lock that, we get home, we need a wee, and it can create that feeling of urgency in the body, which isn't good for the bladder as well. So I hope these tips have been really helpful for you, because these tips are things that I've built now into my lifestyle. So I have my regular pelvic floor exercises through my jade egg practice, but also sometimes if I haven't got my jade egg or time for that, then I've got a pelvic floor routine that I can do without my jade egg. I can sometimes do it in my yoga class when I'm waiting for that to start. I'll spend a few minutes doing it, or just, literally when I'm waking up in the morning, or there's different times that I just pepper my life with a pelvic floor routine, because I really intend to have a really great and healthy pelvic floor for the rest of my life as possible, because I know that if I ignore it, I have the risk of something happening again, and I don't want to go through that again. I really look after my body now with exercise, and I have a mix of exercise that really helps to strengthen my core and really tone the whole of my body. So I'm creating strength in all of my body, so that my pelvic floor and all the associated systems are really cared for and looked afterwards. And then things like my qigong and my jade egg practices, which also are really fun and pleasurable, that help me to cultivate my life force and circulate energy through my body. I mentioned in the first video about massage, that really helps in my pelvic floor as well. Resting is super, super important. So many of us as women are just burnt out, exhausted, stressed, tired, and creating time for rest is so important. And what happens is when we rest, it's so much happening. And, I could do a whole video on this, that, in terms of rest, we don't allow ourselves rest because we think we're not productive. We don't know how to switch off. But it's in rest that we nourish everything in our body. And actually there's a saying, slow down to speed up, that when we rest, we You know, we produce all the feel-good hormones, we produce all the pleasure hormones. The stress hormones can't take hold so much when we rest. You know, so many people are producing stress hormones all day long, and the stress hormones have got a good role in our body. We need them in certain aspects, but we don't need them going all the time. And so, you know, I work with so many women where rest is something that they just don't allow themselves to do, and if they do, they feel guilty. And a whole host of things. So allowing yourselves to rest, but I mean quality rest, you know, doing meditation, doing yoga, just lying there doing nothing, having a lovely bath, being out in nature, just really relaxing, nourishing rest. Learning how to do that is so important for our health and well-being. I might do something on this because I'm so passionate about this. And I was pretty good at it before my prolapse, but my prolapse has taught me so much about it, and I'm even better now. And then also the lifestyle tips, how we are when we lift, how our posture is, how we look after our body when we're sat at desks, how we toilet, is so, so important. And I think all of these little tips can add up to a big, significant amount. So I really encourage you to see what resonates for you and try it and experiment with it. If you want more information on certain things, there's tons around on YouTube. So I'm happy if I can, you know, if you've got specific questions or whatever, if I can answer them, I'm really happy to do so. But have a look at all these different things, because there's a ton of stuff out there, and I'll do my best to put some resources below, so that you've got a list of things to start exploring as well. So yeah. And if you're interested in what I do, I work as a sex, pleasures and intimacy coach, and I help particularly women and couples to access pleasure, overcome sexual issues, and really around finding what's really authentic for them, finding their sexuality. For me, is a gateway to really living more of ourselves. If we're stuck in our sex lives, it affects everything. And I really find that when people address this area of their lives, they really open up in magnificent ways and do amazing things, start hobbies that they never thought they would ever have time to do, set up businesses, take up creative pursuits, enjoy life more healthier, happier. So much, you know, so much I work with women around, and is around how to allow pleasure in your life, and how to rest and relax, and all of these sort of things. So I do online courses, I do retreats, one-to-one sessions. So please take a look at my website, sarahrosebright.com. And sign up to my newsletter, because I do regular newsletters where I do little videos like this, sharing different practices. So I'd love to share some of those with you. And they're related to sex, pleasure, and intimacy in the broadest sense, because it's all interlinked. So I really would love you to come and join me over there. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Share this if you think there's people that will benefit from it. And please check out my next YouTube video in this series, which is around sex and prolapse. So I really hope to see you there. So thank you so much for watching, and enjoy your day, and do comment below as well, because I will check back over the coming months and see what people are saying. And I'd really love to hear if this is useful from you, if you'd like more information. And yeah, just to remember that there's so much you can do to take your healing in your own hands. Go see professionals. There's lots you can learn, lots you can experience, but ultimately it's about, you know, there's just so much that you can do. And if you haven't already, watched my first video about my own healing journey and other things that have worked for me as well, and that were really significant for my journey. So thank you so much for watching, and enjoy your day. Bye.